today, I want to put AI writing to the test and see if it's actually superior compared to human writing. And I think the results may shock you. So here's what we're going to do for today's episode of Cami Critiques. Instead of reviewing and giving feedback for only a student's writing, I'm going to be comparing 3 pieces of writing. 2 of them were written by the top platforms frequently used for generating pieces of writing, ChatGPT and OpenAI, while the other piece of writing was written by one of my top students. So I gave all 3 the exact same prompt, which I pulled from my 365-day writing journey. The prompt was, write a 100 to 120 word response to this question. Share your thoughts on the role of social media in connecting with others. How do you use it to connect with people? So as we are reviewing these responses, I'm going to be giving them a score so that at the end of this, we'll have a much more tangible way to determine who has the best writing. So let's look at the scoring criteria. I'm going to be giving each of these criteria a score of up to 5 points. And at the end, we'll total it all up and see what the final score is out of 20 points. The different factors that I want to look at are first, vocabulary. So how advanced is the vocabulary and potentially how repetitive is the vocabulary. The next factor will be the sentence structures. So again, how advanced and how repetitive are the different sentence structures. In addition, we're going to carefully look at the transitional words and phrases. Now, I want to keep an eye out on the transitions because in the past, when I have reviewed AI writing, that was something that it really struggled with. I have an Instagram post from around 10 months ago when I did a deep dive into the ChatGPT writing style. I noticed that there were very few transitions. Now, in the past 10 months since I did that review, AI technology has definitely improved its writing style. So we'll see how much better it actually is today. And finally, we're going to look at the flow of the writing. So how effectively are those transitions used? How organized is the writing? And how human-like does it feel? Now you'll notice that I did not put grammar, spelling, or conventions on here. And that's because AI is very unlikely to make those kinds of mistakes. And so many people use programs like Grammarly to correct their grammar. So if you are doing your own writing and you have Grammarly, yeah, it's not perfect, but it's pretty unlikely that you'll have that many grammar mistakes. So to control for this, my student and I already reviewed their writing together in class and did a few little grammar corrections. That way, these 3 paragraphs are all on the same playing field. But like I mentioned before, I had this written by one of my top students, so there were like 2 tiny grammar corrections that needed to be made. So what you're going to see today is pretty much all from my student. So let's dive right in to compare these 3 pieces of writing to determine who's the better writer. AI or humans? So first things first, let's look at this word count. I very clearly stated that I wanted a 100 to 120 word response for this piece of writing. And we have a 92 word response 95-word response and a 132-word response. So let's say you were in a time crunch and wanted to cheat on a piece of writing for a school assignment or whatever, and you put this prompt in and trusted that it would give you as many words as you needed, maybe it wouldn't. So you can't fully trust that AI is going to follow your instructions to a T. You would need to play around with it a little bit, but we can see none of these actually followed that word count instruction that I gave it. So let's look at the first piece of writing and look at the strengths and weaknesses. If you would like, you can also use this as a pronunciation mirroring practice. So you get a little 2-in-1 today. Social media plays a significant role in connecting individuals worldwide, breaking down geographical barriers and fostering communication. Personally, I use social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram to stay in touch with friends and family, share updates about my life, and engage in conversations with like-minded individuals. Through social media, I can connect with people from diverse backgrounds, cultures, and interests, creating a sense of community and belonging. It allows me to stay connected in real time, share experiences, and support others, making the world feel smaller and more interconnected than ever before. So, this is a pretty good piece of writing. I like that in the introduction, it uses varied vocabulary. A lot of people will use the word important all throughout their essay. It's important to do this, it's important to do that. So seeing right here in the beginning that it's using a more advanced synonym is a great sign. I also really like this phrase, breaking down geographical barriers. That's pretty cool. And we also have some more advanced vocabulary with fostering. So fostering is a great word to use instead of building or improving. It isn't an exact synonym, but in this case, it works really well. So the first part of this sentence is fine, but I feel like it could be a little bit more advanced. Like instead of I use, you could say I utilize. And stay in touch with, that's a nice idiom to use, but it feels a little bit simplistic. It's not my favorite that I've seen. However, I do like this second part of the sentence saying, engage in conversations with like-minded individuals. That is more advanced. So that kind of saves the sentence. With this next sentence, I can connect with people from diverse backgrounds, cultures, and interests. This is fine, but it also feels a little bit like an advertisement in a way. I see this exact phrase very frequently used in my students' university statement of purpose essays. They'll very frequently write, I want to go to this university so that I can connect with people from diverse cultures, backgrounds, and interests. Because that's a phrase that's often used on the university's websites to try and promote their programs. So personally, I'm over this sentence. I don't want to see it anymore. We can mix it up and try something different. This next part, creating a sense of community and belonging, it's fine. It's cute. I wouldn't say that it's great, and it's not horrible. It's just fine. And I have the same feelings with the first part of this next sentence. It allows me to stay connected in real time, share experiences, and support others. It's okay. With this phrase, support others, I don't really see anything else in this paragraph about support. So in context, it doesn't really make sense. Like, we talk about staying in touch, sharing updates, having conversations with like-minded individuals. But for this part, support others, that's like helping. But where else have we discussed helping in this? So it's kind of out of left field, meaning it doesn't fit. It's sort of randomly inserted into this writing, possibly just to add more words to that word count. But on the other hand, I do like the rest of the sentence. Making the world feel smaller really nicely ties in to that introduction of breaking down geographical barriers. So this is something that I do recommend to my students for conclusion sentences. You should never copy your introduction sentence for your conclusion. That's a relatively common misconception. But if you're really stuck in what to write, you can paraphrase your introduction sentence. So this is a really nice way of paraphrasing. This part, though, than ever before, feels basic. It's not very advanced. It's somewhat vague, and I would describe this as being perfunctory, meaning it doesn't require very much thought. I score high school standardized test essays through ETS, which is the same company that runs the TOEFL. And when we see these kinds of broad and vague statements, we will lower that score because this doesn't require any thought. It is very basic and too broad. So let's look at the scoring criteria for this. For the vocabulary, it's fine. I like the phrases that it uses, like breaking down geographical barriers. We have significant, fostering, but overall, it is relatively basic. It's not repetitive, which I do appreciate, but because it's also not very advanced, I'm going to give this a score out of 3. It definitely does not deserve a 5, and even a 4 would be too generous for this. So just a 3. In terms of sentence structures, while the sentences are more advanced, they are also quite repetitive. So when we look at this first sentence, we have this like clause 1 and clause 2. That's our first kind of sentence structure. In the next one, it's very list-like. Stay in touch with friends, share updates, and do this. And then in our next sentence, it's also list-like. Diverse backgrounds, cultures, and interests. And this final sentence, again, it's list-like. Connected in real time, share experiences, support others, make the world feel smaller. So, because we have these 3 sentences in a row that all share basically the same sentence structure, while they are good sentences, I'm going to give it a 2 because it's very repetitive and that's not ideal in your writing. Now, transitions. So in our first sentence, there's no initial transition, and that's fine. You don't need to have a transitional word or phrase right away. In the next sentence, we have the transitional word personally, and then we have through social media. So that's fine. I like that they're mixing it up and not using something basic like then, next, in addition. And in our last one, we don't have any transition. So out of these 4 sentences, there are only 2 transitions. This first one is pretty basic, and the second one is better, but it also doesn't blow my socks off. So again, for transitions, they're there, but they're relatively basic. So I'm going to go with a 2. And finally, for the flow is fine. The ideas do all go together, but because of this part, support others, it kind of catches you off guard and you're like, wait, was this discussed earlier? And because it's basically all lists, and this final sentence doesn't have any kind of transitional word or phrase. So that gives us a total score of 10 out of 20 for Essay 1. Let's move on to Essay 2. Social media serves as a vital tool for fostering connections in our interconnected world. Personally, I leverage platforms like Facebook and Twitter to bridge geographical gaps, sharing life moments with friends and family. These spaces facilitate engagement, allowing me to celebrate milestones and stay connected with a diverse network. Beyond personal connections, social media broadens my horizon by enabling participation in global conversations. However, I remain mindful of maintaining a balance, valuing in-person interactions. In essence, social media, when used judiciously, amplifies our ability to connect, creating a digital thread that weaves through our lives. So, right away, Essay 2 is a huge step up from Essay 1. There's a lot more detail, much more advanced vocabulary, and we even have a contrasting statement. So, let's look closer at this essay. One thing that I do find to be pretty fascinating, if we look at the introduction between Essay 2 and Essay 1, they're very, very similar. So social media serves as a vital tool. Social media plays a significant role. That's basically the same thing. And then our interconnected world and individuals worldwide. We even have fostering here and fostering here. And with our next sentence, personally, I leverage platforms like Facebook and Twitter. Right here, personally, I use social media platforms like Facebook and Instagram. So very, very similar. But let's ignore Essay 1 now and just focus in on Essay 2. Again, we have that nice switch up from important to vital. I always appreciate that. And we have the good vocabulary with fostering and interconnected. I like this. It's nice. I also appreciate using this word serves because we can kind of use it as a synonym for uses, or if we look at our previous one, plays a role. So serves is just a step up from uses. It's not an exact synonym, but in this case, it is a good alternative. In this next sentence, personally, it's okay, but we can do better, right? And then saying I leverage. I really like this vocabulary. It's another great alternative to use. So keep that in mind with your writing. Just like there are tons of synonyms for important, there are also many synonyms for the word use. Another good usage of vocabulary is this phrase right here, bridge geographical gaps. I like that. That's almost poetic. This part right here, sharing life moments with friends and family, it's fine. It's nothing special, but I'm not going to dock points for it. In the next sentence, these spaces facilitate engagement, allowing me to celebrate milestones, da-da-da-da-da. I like that vocabulary word, facilitate. That's also really nicely used. And then celebrate milestones. Another good bit of vocabulary. Here, again, it feels a little bit boring to say stay connected with a diverse network. Network does feel a little bit vague. We could be more specific. Like in the previous one, we had like-minded individuals, but just network, especially if we're talking about the internet. The internet is a huge place, so it would be nice if they were a little bit more specific. I know that they use the word diverse, but it's kind of lame. Now, this phrase, beyond personal connections, this is a really nice transitional phrase. It shows that we're going to kind of switch gears. A lot of people will use a transitional word like moreover, furthermore, in addition, and those are completely fine. But using this kind of transitional phrase is even better because it's bringing in the context of your writing. So as you are doing your writing, again, moreover, furthermore, those are fantastic. But if you can do this kind of transitional phrase, you're on the right track. Now, this part, social media broadens my horizon by enabling participation in global conversations. That's fine, but it's also feeling a little bit advertising, right? We already talked about this in the previous paragraph. So I'm gonna dock some points for that because it isn't really creative. And this just feels like an advertisement for Twitter or Facebook. Also on Facebook, do you communicate with people on a global level? I know I do not talk to strangers on Facebook. Facebook is only for family and friends. Maybe on Twitter or Instagram, whatever. That's more of a global space, but Facebook is friends and family only. But moving on, I do like that they are doing a contrasting sentence. I remain mindful of maintaining a balance. This is really nice instead of just saying, I try to maintain a balance, or I think about maintaining a balance. So I remain mindful of is a good phrase to use. And in this conclusion sentence, using in essence, that's nice. I like that. Instead of in conclusion or to conclude. In essence is a big step up from those. In conclusion or to conclude are fine. They get the job done, but they aren't very special. And we also have some good, juicy vocabulary in here with judiciously and amplifies. These are really good vocab words. And then this part, creating a digital thread that weaves through our lives. I love that. As a teacher and someone that reviews a lot of pieces of writing, I love seeing these kinds of sentences or phrases like appear bridge geographical gaps or creating a digital thread. These are excellent. They really help paint a picture in your mind of what's happening. So let's go through the scoring criteria and see how many points Essay 2 can get. For vocabulary, I think you know what I'm going to say. 5 points. Beautiful, descriptive vocabulary. Just so many different great words with the judiciously, amplifies, facilitate, and then the digital thread. This vocabulary was awesome. But let's look at our sentence structures. What do we think? In the first sentence, it's fine. It's kind of nothing special. In the next sentence, it's a very similar sentence structure to the introduction in Essay 1. So it's different from the first sentence, and I appreciate that. Now, this second sentence does feel a little bit similar because if you look at the previous one, we have our first phrase and then verb ing, right? And in this one, we have the phrase and then verb being. When I say verbing, I mean verb plus ing. So a little bit repetitive, but let's keep going. The next sentence is good. It's a little bit similar to the first one, but it's different enough that I'll call it unique. But in this sentence, it's very similar to the second and third sentence, where we have our two different clauses. But right here, we have that verb ing. Interesting. And the final sentence is more like a list, but that's unique. We haven't had any other list-like sentences throughout this paragraph. So I think that's fine. So we can see out of these 6 sentences in this paragraph, the first one and the fourth one are not exactly the same. They have some similarities, but they're different enough. I'll call them unique. We don't have anything like this 6th sentence. However, we have 3 sentences that are basically the same. So it doesn't deserve a perfect score of a 5, but it does have enough variation and the different transitions in it do help, so I'll give it a 4. So speaking of transitions, let's look at those. Like I mentioned before, the word personally, it's kind of lame. I don't know. And then with the next sentence, there isn't a super defined transition, but it still flows really well because it ties in that engagement with the previous sentence of the sharing and bridging the gaps. So that's fine. This is a nice way to do transitional words or phrases when you kind of call back to those previous sentences. And then, like I mentioned before, I really like this transition of beyond personal connections. So that was good. Using however, this also works pretty well. It's good to use however instead of but, because but is just a little bit boring. I have also made a video about different alternatives to using but, so you can go check that out. And I also mentioned that I really like this conclusion sentence transition of in essence. So even though I didn't love the usage of the word personally, all the other transitions, they're really good. So I will give this a score of 5 for transitions. So now looking at the flow of it. Overall, the flow of ideas was pretty good, but I did have a little bit of issues reading it out loud because there were so many damn commas. It did a lot of these inverted sentence styles, which was nice. It added variation, but in some cases, it made it feel a little bit choppy. It was almost trying too hard to add some variation. So because of that, I'm not going to give it a perfect score for the flow because those commas everywhere. The flow of ideas was really good though. So I will give it a score of 4. So that gives us a total score of 18 out of 20 points for essay number 2. Now let's move on to the longest essay out of the bunch. Social media is an integral part of today's society, as it is a powerful tool to create bonds and communicate with others. However, it's important to recognize its downsides and risks. To begin with, the positive sides of social media are many, as we can connect with friends and family in an instant, while also connecting with online communities centered around your interests that may be hard to find in real life. Despite its benefits, using social media can be detrimental. One risk that users face is the potential of misunderstanding others through text-based communication, as it lacks the nuances and facial expressions of face-to-face communication. In conclusion, social media is a great tool for modern-day society, but it's crucial to find a balance between traditional and technological communication for meaningful connections. So overall, it's quite good. But I'm wondering if you noticed something with this compared to the other 2 essays. Can you guess what is standing out to me the most? All 3 of them had basically the exact same introduction. So we had social media plays a significant role in connecting individuals worldwide. Social media serves as a vital tool for fostering connections around the world. Social media is an integral part of today's society and communicating with others. So we have tool and then tool, connecting, interconnected, and bonds. So basically the same thing. Significant, vital, integral. All 3 of these are essentially synonyms for important. Worldwide, interconnected world, and society, all very, very similar. So this kind of shows you all the different ways that you could paraphrase basically the same sentence. Now, before we dive deeper into essay 3, I want to point out a major thing that it's lacking, and that is it doesn't actually answer the second part of the prompt with how do you use it to connect with people. So the other ones do have this personally sentence where they specifically describe how they use it. But this one actually doesn't specifically describe how they use social media. So, that's something that you need to keep in mind when you are writing a response. Carefully read the prompt. And when you are using AI to generate, carefully review what AI has written to make sure that it actually integrated everything that you needed from the prompt. So let's go through this essay. Social media is an integral part of today's society. Love that use of integral, really good vocabulary, as it is a powerful tool to create bonds. I like the phrase of as it is. This is a nice alternative to using because. You could very easily use because it is a powerful tool, but using as is a nice way to switch it up. Then here I like how it uses powerful tool instead of just a tool. This adjective of powerful. That's a really nice adjective to use. With the next sentence, however, it's important to recognize its downsides and risks. I think this is really good because we are immediately showing that this will be a kind of compare and contrast sort of essay. because we have our positive sentence and now we have the negative sentence. So that's something that we haven't seen in the other two responses. So I like this. It's something different. But, we have the kind of lame word of important. So I don't love that. Important is obviously grammatically correct, but it's so easy to beef it up and use something more advanced. And then I like this to recognize its downsides. That's good vocabulary. But downsides is a little bit basic. There are more advanced vocabulary words you could use. Downsides is fine though. It's just not as good as it could be. Then we have the transitional phrase to begin with. This is fine. It's, again, not as advanced as it could be, but it gets the job done. It's okay, but it could be better. I do like this phrase, though. The positive sides of social media are many. Instead of saying there are many positive sides to social media, this is a nice way to kind of switch up that more basic sentence structure. So I like that. That's pretty good. The next part, as we can connect with friends and family in an instant, I like that. It really helps to paint a picture of how fast the internet is, because we're talking about it being a tool. So showing its positive side that in an instant is really nice. And using while is also really good. A lot of people might just say, and connect with online communities, So using while, showing that simultaneous usage, is a nice, more advanced alternative. And this phrase, online communities, centered around your interests that may be hard to find in real life. While it is a little bit wordy, I like how descriptive and straightforward it is. In the previous essays, they do say similar things like stay connected with a diverse network, and then global conversations. In the other one, engage in conversations with like-minded individuals. I like that vocabulary a little bit better, but I think that this is a more clear description. It is very straight to the point, so I appreciate that. I especially like this inclusion of hard to find in real life because we will be talking about those limitations of online stuff compared to real life later in the paragraph. Here's how it's better than real life, but we're going to directly go against that in the end of the paragraph where it'll say, here's how it's worse than real life. So I think that's a really nice tie-in. Now in the next paragraph, despite its benefits, I think that this is good. It's a nice alternative, again, to just using however or but. We're kind of tying in the previous sentence talking about the good stuff into this transitional phrase. Benefits isn't necessarily my favorite word. It's kind of like downsides. It's fine. It gets the point across, but it could be better. However, I really like this vocabulary word of detrimental. It's an awesome use of advanced vocabulary instead of it can be bad. It can be negative. It's detrimental. Love that. Then this phrase, one risk that users face. I think this is another phrase that is fairly straightforward and to the point, and it gives you that clear visual representation. If we kind of compare this back to essay 2, it wasn't as straightforward. Like I mentioned a few times, it was almost more poetic. And there's a time and place for that, but you don't always have to use phrases like bridge geographical gaps and create a digital thread that weaves through our lives. Sometimes these more straightforward and to the point sentences or phrases are equally effective. And this more poetic writing style also has a time and place, but it isn't necessary all the time. So if you have this more straightforward writing style, you don't need to feel bad about yourself that you aren't writing like this, because this is also perfectly adequate. Looking at the rest of this sentence, I like this phrase that they face the potential of misunderstanding. This is nice. Instead of saying there may be misunderstandings or there could be misunderstandings, using potential is a good advanced alternative to those words. So I like that. And then this phrase, as it lacks the nuances, that's really good. I like the vocabulary in there. And wrapping it up with the conclusion sentence, we do have in conclusion. Like I mentioned before, you can use more advanced vocabulary instead of in conclusion. It's perfectly acceptable, but you can make it a little bit better, like in the previous essay where they used in essence. So in conclusion is fine, but it's not my favorite. Then with the next part of the sentence, it is very similar to that introduction, right? Social media is an integral part of today's society. And then social media is a great tool for modern day society. I like how they did change it a little bit, but it is still similar enough that it's quite noticeable. And then with the second part of the sentence, but it's crucial to find a balance, it does kind of draw back to that second sentence where we have here's the good, but here's the bad. So it's a little bit similar, but we do have that detail of find a balance between traditional and technological communications. So I'm going to say that it's fine. I also like this alternative word to important where they use crucial. So kudos for that. And then I also like this vocabulary of traditional and technological communications. We didn't use that word traditional before, so it is nice to use that instead of saying regular or normal. Traditional is a good upgraded alternative. Now let's get on to scoring. With the vocabulary, there are some places where the vocabulary is a little bit simplistic and repetitive. So even though we mixed it up with integral, crucial, different words like that, we still had the word important in there. It's fine, but I would have liked something besides important. We also have the word communicate or communication in here many times. So we have communicate right there, communication right here, and then again, communication again right here and right here. So in a relatively short essay, we are using this word 4 different times. I also noticed the use of as a few different times, and they were used as an alternative to because, but it was a little bit noticeable because again, this is only 132 words. So if you have any kind of repetition, the reader is going to notice it. So compared to number 2, this has much lower vocabulary, but compared to essay 1, I would say that it's pretty similar, if not slightly better. And this is for a few reasons. One, it is a little bit longer, so there's just more opportunities to use various vocabulary words. But but it also just gives more descriptions. And again, it's more straightforward. So while I gave the vocabulary a 3 for essay 1, for essay 3, I'm going to give it a 4. Now, sentence structures. Like I mentioned before, the sentences using as are quite similar in their structure. So that gives us 2 sentences that are essentially the same. With this second sentence, it is shorter, and I know a lot of people seem to think that short sentences are bad. A lot of my students will ask me, how can I make my sentences longer? But you don't have to make every sentence long. Having a few short sentences mixed in gives variation in that sentence structure. And sometimes these shorter sentences are honestly more powerful. So this one, it's important to recognize its downsides and risks. Hell yeah, it is straight to the point. We don't need that extra detail in this case. It's nice to have it just straightforward. So I actually really like the use of that shorter sentence. And this second sentence is actually quite a nice contrast because this one does have a lot of extra details. So I like that, how we go from short to long. Then we have our next sentence, which is also shorter, but it does feel kind of similar to this short sentence. So now we have 2 of these very similar style short sentences with the however, contrasting word, and then right here, despite its benefits, contrasting phrase. So those are quite similar. And then in this sentence as well, it's quite long. So that does almost give it a little bit of repetition. It isn't super clearly repetitive, but it's there. But I would say that our final sentence is different enough, so that doesn't feel repetitive compared to any of the other ones. So even though it did have those 2 big chunks that were kind of similar, there was enough sentence variation and it effectively used those short sentences. I'm going to give it a 4. It didn't feel as repetitive as essay 2, but it wasn't perfect. Now let's look at transitions. There's the use of however to begin with. Those are fine. Despite its benefits, I like that. It's a little bit different. Then this transitional phrase is good. It's different, saying one brisk. So it draws back to that previous sentence of talking about negatives. But then in conclusion, like I said before, kind of boring, kind of lame. But if we compare this to essay 1, essay 1 only used 2 transitional words or phrases. That was it. It just had personally and through social media. So I think essay 3 definitely did better. So I'm not going to give it a 2, but I am going to give it a 3 just because they were a little bit formulaic and a little boring, kind of. Sorry. Now looking at the flow, I would say that it flows really well. It has enough sentence variation so that it doesn't feel repetitive. It's not list-like, so that's nice. And the amount of clauses and commas doesn't make it feel choppy. Like it's a good amount. So I appreciate that. But it isn't perfect. So I am going to give it a 4. So this gives us a final score of 15 out of 20 points. So can you guess which one is ChatGPT, the student, or OpenAI? I want you to put your predictions down in the comment box. Along with your predictions, I want you to write why you think that way. So let's reveal those answers. Drum roll, please. Essay number 1 was generated by OpenAI. Essay number 2 was generated by ChatGPT. And essay number 3 was written by one of my students. So, did you get any of them correct? As we can see here, the AI-generated responses are not always better than human-written responses. We can clearly see that the OpenAI response was worse in every way. Now, when we look at ChatGPT versus the student, yes, it did score higher for a few of the criteria, but it wasn't significantly higher, except for like the transitions, which I do find shocking because just 10 months ago, when I reviewed ChatGPT's writing, transitions were the thing that it struggled with the most. So AI's writing is definitely evolving. Now, one thing that I do want to point out, yes, the vocabulary was juicy and delicious, but this kind of vocabulary isn't always appropriate. So, for example, my husband uses ChatGPT to write his emails quite frequently because who wants to waste time writing an email? However, he'll have me take a second look at some of his emails before sending them off. And in a quick business email, using this kind of really advanced vocabulary can be quite awkward. So I often have to go through these ChatGPT generated emails and simplify the vocabulary or take out quite a few things because for just a simple email, this kind of writing is weird. It's really not normal to communicate in this way in daily life or even for a lot of business situations. So that is something that you really need to keep in mind. I would say if we're just considering emails or business communications, the way that the student's writing was written, that would be the most ideal style of communication because it was very straight to the point, but it also had that excellent flow. So another thing to keep in mind with the student's response being a little bit lower than ChatGPT's is, one, they're a high school student, and in their country, they don't have to write essays very often. So this student doesn't have very much experience with writing, even in their own native language. So I can only imagine how much this student's writing is going to significantly improve after starting university and needing to write more essays and do more written assignments for their classes. So give it a few years, and I'm sure that this student will be far outperforming any kind of AI-generated response. Let's talk about how you can incorporate AI into your own English writing practice. Simply put, you can basically do the same thing that we did today. You can write your own response to a prompt, then give that same prompt to ChatGPT, and then compare what are ChatGPT's strengths and weaknesses compared to your own. Because as you saw, AI-generated responses are not always better than human responses. Maybe the first few times that you do this kind of practice, you'll feel like AI's responses are always better, but you can learn from those strengths and you can start incorporating them into your own writing. And as you continue doing this practice and taking some inspiration from the AI-generated responses, you'll notice that your writing will become more even with what AI is suggesting to you. Now, when it comes to this kind of prompt that asked about a personal opinion or experience, your answer may vary a lot from AI because your experience is different and AI doesn't actually have an experience with anything. But if you're practicing your essay writing for different English exams, for school assignments, or summarizing. This can be a really useful exercise. One example of this that I actually did with this student was to do summarizing practice. So my student read an Ingo article, and then they put that article into ChatGPT with the prompt of summarize this article in 100 to 120 words, whatever. Because if you just say summarize the article, sometimes ChatGPT will instead paraphrase the article, so it ends up being equally as long as the original. So you do need to give it that additional prompt of how long you want it to be. That will also make it a more even playing field when you compare the AI response to yours, if they're about the same length. And then using the same technique today of looking at the strengths and weaknesses, we compared the AI response to the students'. So initially, the student thought, oh, my writing isn't as good as ChatGPT's because my vocabulary isn't advanced or whatever. But after going through it, we could see that the students' sentence structure variation was better. We could see that a lot of the sentences were a little more straightforward and to the point because, like I mentioned before, you don't always need the kind of flowery, creative sentences. And doing that practice, one, helped give the student inspiration for the next time that they wrote a summary, but it also gave them confidence to see how well their writing compares to an AI response. So if you haven't been feeling very good about your writing skills, give this exercise a go. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised with how well you can write compared to what technology can do. Because at the end of the day, writing is a form of natural communication, and that can never be perfectly replicated by a computer. Not yet, at least. And while I understand that a lot of people don't enjoy writing practice because they may feel that it's a little bit tedious or time consuming, it's an excellent way to improve your vocabulary, your grammar, organization, sentence structures. If you feel like your speaking skills have kind of plateaued and they're not increasing at all, you should definitely incorporate more writing practice, because writing really helps you to slow down your output so that you can analyze how to improve your vocabulary, how to improve your grammar, and how to make more advanced sentence structures. And once you can do that with writing, you can definitely apply that to your speaking. There are tons of different writing resources available online, but of course, I recommend using the My 365-Day Writing Journey. So in this writing practice journal, there are daily prompts for every day of the year. And along with those prompts, I include specific grammar tips and additional tips for success, whether it's vocabulary, content, organization, sentence structures, whatever, so that you can improve your writing day by day throughout the year. Now, unfortunately, there seems to be some kind of issue with the paperback distribution through Amazon. It's a little bit limited for which countries it's available in, but the hardcover is available through most international Amazon distributors, except for Japan. I don't know why. However, I do offer a downloadable PDF version, so if you are not able to get the printed version, don't worry, you can just check out the ebook on camisenglishcorner.com. And if you need any additional help with writing, definitely check out my writing correction classes, where I give one-on-one personalized feedback where we correct all aspects of your writing, including the vocabulary, grammar, content, and organization. These writing correction classes are an especially useful resource for people applying to universities that have to write their statement of purpose or application essay. So if you are working on one of those right now, definitely check out the classes. But if you would like some free writing corrections, I would love to review them on my next episode of Cami Critiques. So check out all of the submission information in the description box so that I can fix your writing for $0, while also helping other students learn how to improve their own writing. So if you found this helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe. And if you're preparing for the TOEFL exam, definitely go check out my previous episode of Cami Critiques, where I carefully evaluated a subscriber's academic discussion writing response. Whew, that's a long name. So good luck with your writing, and I will see you later.